Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Good morning to you all. 2 weeks ago tomorrow, I had the honor of sitting down with General James Mattis, former Secretary of Defense, of course, Marine Corps General, at the Nixon Library in Yorba Linda. It was a terrific conversation. It was too short. It was only an hour and 15 minutes, and General Mattis has done me the great kindness of allowing me to continue it this morning. General, welcome. Congratulations. Call Sign Chaos. Your new book is a New York Times bestseller. Congratulations.
Well, thanks, Hugh, and it's good to be on your show.
It is good to have you back. After that conversation, my brother-in-law, a Vietnam-era Marine, said, "Did you ask him about General Tulin, a buddy of his from long ago?" I said, "I didn't, but I think General Tulin is the fellow who came up with Call Sign Chaos, right?"
He is the irreverent junior that came up with my call sign. That's correct.
Can you give people the story behind it? Because it's a great way to begin the conversation about the serious stuff.
Well, John and I were serving out in the Mojave Desert with about 7,000 sailors and Marines in our regiment. He was my operations officer, and I would constantly go down to his office because I had brilliant ideas. He would listen patiently, and then sometimes they would actually work. But one day I was down giving him another one of my brilliant suggestions, and as I was walking up his office, I saw chaos written on his whiteboard. I asked him what that was about, and he avoided the question. So then I got very interested, got it out of him, worked it out of him. It was, Colonel has another outstanding suggestion. It was a somewhat tongue-in-cheek view of the level of brilliance he thought I had compared to what I thought I had. But I thought it was a good reminder to stay humble in this world, so I adopted it as my call sign.
Another episode in Call Sign Chaos is when you're meeting with troops, I believe it's before the first Iraq War, and they're saying, "We're living the dream, sir, we're fine." And you said, "No, come on, tell me the truth. Give me something I can fix." I think that's great advice to every leader. Did the Marines respond then? And I know they did then, but do they often respond to "give me something I can fix" as a great invitation to get real feedback?
Well, like all my good ideas, I adopted that from someone else. I was reading about a mayor of New York who would, as he wandered around the city, always asked, "How am I doing?" Knowing that in the military hierarchy, few people really want to be critical of a general, I adapted it, and I said, "Give me something I can fix," and that would often elicit a response. They'd be some of the most mundane things, to needing toilet paper in the latrines and the heads, to something much more significant that we're not really sure what we're supposed to do here. At which time, all my senses went on high alert, knowing that if your troops don't know what you want, they're probably not going to deliver it. So yes, it did work, and it continues to work to this day, and I think it works in any leadership position.
Now, General, one of the things I liked about Call Sign Chaos is you do not minimize the difficulty of combat. And I don't mean the threat of combat. I mean the crude living, the difficult hours, the no showers, no shaving, keep moving, dust in your eyes, dust everywhere for weeks at a time. I think Bing West and you really tried to communicate what it was like to march up to Baghdad or the first time in the Gulf War, destroy the Republican Guard.
Well, Bing is a very combat-seasoned Marine. He was a wonderful writer to co-author the book with, and he was the one who showed me how you put it in human terms, how you try to take the reader and move them into the actual complexities, the discomfort, the danger, and yet also reveal the character of those who go in, that just this unselfish commitment to one another that really keeps young men going when they're in the face of the enemy. So I learned a lot about writing in putting this book together, but it also recalled to me why I stuck around that outfit for 4 decades, and that was just the absolute joy of serving alongside young patriots who signed that blank check payable with their lives to the American people. And they just stay rambunctious and high-spirited in the face of no showers for 2 months or the danger of walking in mine-strewn roadways, that sort of thing. They're just a joy to be around.
General, you also take time, and this touched my brother-in-law, George Phillip, to talk about Vietnam veterans. You are not yourself a Vietnam-era veteran. You came in after the war had been over. but you spend a lot of time talking about the lessons they imparted to you, the role that they played in the forming of the modern Corps, and the debt we owe them. I'd like you to expand on that because they don't often hear that from people.
Well, I can't say it too often. These were the sergeants, the gunnery sergeants, the captains, the majors, who, when I joined the Marine Corps, they imparted to me the grim skills that I would need. They were unrelenting in their demands, but they were coaches. They weren't tyrants. They didn't lord it over those of us who hadn't been in Vietnam. Rather, they tried to share what they knew. And they constantly brought out the demands that would be placed on you and how you deal with those, from the youngest NCOs who'd been in Vietnam, who have a lot to do with a young infantry officer's success if you listen to them, to the very, very senior officers for whom Vietnam was not their only war. These guys put their thumbprint on us, and they did it in a way, at a time, and in a manner that really changed the way you looked at combat, at war. And I would like to think that listening to them carefully, we brought more people home alive from the wars we then had to fight, because they had warned us what we were in for.
I think another person who probably got that lesson, and he is very well presented in Call Sign Chaos, is General Dunford. Now, we have a friend in common in Mel Speed, so I met General Dunford at the military YMCA fundraiser, and I got the sense of presence that he communicates. But in Call Sign Chaos, he seems like the steadiest guy on a battlefield you could possibly want.
Well, nothing could unsettle the guy we called Fighting Joe Dunford. No braggadocio. He is simply a man who does the job, but he also earns over and over again every day the confidence of his subordinates, the confidence of his seniors. He was someone who wasted no time on unproductive discussions. Matter of fact, he would recognize when a tough decision was made that had to be carried out, and he rolled up his sleeves and carried it out. But he had a way of connecting with the youngest sailors and Marines on the battlefield, and when he was in personal danger, his voice wouldn't even change on the radio. It was still the calm, steady as she goes, Joe Dunford, in command of himself and rapidly in command of any situation that was thrown in his lap.
He also turns out to be a very competent diplomat. I was on a trip with John Bolton when he was there to talk with our Turkish counterparts, and I've seen him do that time and time again. Allies are in the news. Allies are a lot in Call Sign Chaos. I want to quote the book, "History is compelling. Nations with allies thrive. Nations without them wither." Yesterday, our allies, specifically Great Britain, France, and Germany, finally came around to our point of view about the Iranians, insisting that the Iranians come back to the table prepared to get rid of the sunset on the JCPOA, to get rid of their intercontinental ballistic missiles, to stop their bad export of terror. I'm welcoming this development. Didn't get much attention yesterday, but I think you would as well, because you're a big proponent of allies working in concert.
Well, I've had the opportunity, the privilege even, of fighting many times for our country, Hugh, and I have never fought in an all-American formation. For example, we set up NATO to defend Western Europe. That was the whole point of it after World War II, when the Russians clearly were no longer going to be our allies. In fact, the first time NATO went to war, declared Article 5 that an attack on one was an attack on all, was when New York City and Washington, D.C. were attacked on 9/11. And immediately I was in Afghanistan within 2 months, and I was joined on the battlefield by allies, by Canadian troops and Norwegian, Australian, New Zealand, United Kingdom, Germany, Jordan, Turkey. Not all of them were NATO allies, but because NATO was there, that attracted other allies. And I think that, as they say down under in Australia, you never have enough mates, you never have enough friends, well, you never have enough allies. And America's unique strength is the number of nations that see our values as a reason to align with us. We're not an empire of geography where we take over other countries. We're an empire of ideas, and when we stay true to our values, that's when we have our like-minded nations with us. And you just pointed out here on Iran, which has been a very, very difficult issue, including for our allies. And yet, like you pointed out, they aligned with us yesterday in a way. It didn't make a lot of news because of some other things going on, but that was a key development. You're right.
You write a lot about Iran in Call Sign Chaos, General, if I can pause on that. You said at Cent Command, you had great commanders on the field in Iraq and Afghanistan, so it was your job to come up with a knapsack full of options for dealing with Iran. I'm sure they've been updated. I'm sure they're still there. Do you think our allies, or at least your colleagues in uniform, have the same understanding of the threat posed by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps that you do?
I have no doubt that the military is alert to that danger on a strategic level. You can't be completely focused there because we have other interests around the world. But certainly what you do in the military is you come up with military options and you align with the State Department and our diplomats who are the front line on our foreign policy, and make certain our diplomats always speak from a position of strength. But at the same time, most of the problems in the world are not dealt with by military options. And you see this administration working the options of sanctions right now and aligning diplomats for diplomatic action to deal with the absolutely inexcusable Iranian attacks on countries and shipping in the region. But at the same time, there are a lot of other options besides the military options that you want to exhaust first. But the military owes options to the commander-in-chief, and I have no doubt those options have been worked up.
In Call Sign Chaos, you refer to the United Arab Emirates as, quote, Little Sparta. And I've heard that term thrown around. If you can explain why. And then they have a nuclear power complex, which is the only one in that region. It worries me, given the attack on Saudi Arabia's oil facility. Do you think UAE, Little Sparta, can defend its own there?
Well, Little Sparta got its reputation because every time we were in trouble, they would be fighting alongside us. I still remember them in Desert Storm. I remember them in Bosnia when we were working there, and actually we had some challenges getting allies with us, but United Arab Emirates was with us 100%. They are, by the way, they are in Afghanistan with us today. This is a nation that has troops that are professional. They know how to fight, and I think that they're a nation that we have got to keep with us. Now, in terms of the nuclear enterprise they have there, and by the way, it's one they invite in the International Atomic Energy folks to keep an eye on. They have no secrets about it. It is a peaceful program, uniquely different than the way Iran has treated the inspectors over many years. Basically, United Arab Emirates has got a responsible approach to this. Now, can they protect what they have for a nuclear industry against any kind of attack? I'm confident that they can. However, that does not mean that Iran should be given a free hand to practice more of this inexcusable activity. The whole world has got to tell Iran to stop this. We need a stable Middle East if we're ever to stop the killing and the chaos that's coming out of that region, because this affects the entire world, and we cannot tolerate this continued effort by Iran from trying to murder the Saudi ambassador in Washington, D.C. a couple years ago, to attacking Saudi Arabia, to attacking shipping, to shooting down our own reconnaissance aircraft. This is intolerable.
Now, I want to switch subjects on you, General Mattis, to something else in Call Sign Chaos, which I did not get to at the Nixon Library, and I kicked myself in the butt for. You killed off Joint Command because of EBO. It is a marvelous case study in having the willingness to confront the obvious malfunction of an idea gone wrong. Would you tell people that story and why the acronym EBO was a menace to the military?
Well, EBO, Effects-Based Operations, was an approach by that command to take a valid, workable U.S. Air Force process to take on, for example, an electrical grid or a railroad grid or a highway grid, and how do you break those grids so that the enemy, the effect on the enemy, is most precise and most compelling. The problem was, at Joint Forces Command, they'd lost sight of the theoretical aspects. And when you don't pay attention to theory, when you don't pay attention to the fundamental nature of anything, then you're going to get in trouble when you start coming up with solutions that violate the fundamental nature, in this case of war, which is fundamentally unpredictable. You start a war, many nations do, and end up losing it. Now, they didn't start the war to lose it. It means that there's something unpredictable by its nature. And so when I realized that intellectually this command was not coming up with sound ideas, we ended up paying a price that you could only see in hindsight. For example, we were still shrinking the size of the U.S. Army as this war against terrorism began, and we saw soldiers going back-to-back 15-month tours because we decided you didn't need a larger army because of these, what I would call bumper stickers. So there came a point when Secretary Gates and Admiral Mullen, the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of Joint Chiefs, were dealing with some very tough budget issues. And I realized then there was a way to do the good parts of that command and yet disband the overarching organization, which was frankly intellectually not up to the job. So I recommended it go away. The Secretary of Defense, under Admiral Mike Mullen's suggestion, who brought it to him, agreed. And for the first time since World War II, we disbanded a four-star man that was no longer fit for its purpose.
It is a terrific message to every leader of every team about getting rid of that which is no longer useful and indeed counterproductive. The other message, I've already used this in my job as running the Nixon Foundation, communicating commander's intent. You can have decentralized decision-making, provided you write decision makers have the commander's intent down. The aligned independence of subordinate units depends upon commander intent being communicated. Can you expand on that, General Mattis?
I can. The Vietnam veterans had put an idea in my head that the more decisions have to go up to the highest level, the more you paralyze any organization. And their point to me was make very clear, spend a lot of time as an officer communicating what you want to do in vague terms, how you want to do it, and what you want at the end as an end state. And at that point, take your hands off the steering wheel and allow your subordinates to use their initiative and their aggressiveness to carry it out. So what you want to do is create an environment where, from the most senior people in an organization down, in my case, to the youngest sailors and Marines, they all feel like they own the mission, and then you want them to use their initiative. You reward them for using their initiative in carrying it out. That is the way, that is the method you do it, is by making this very clear in what we call in the military commander's intent. But again, Hugh, this is something that works in any organization where you want everybody pulling together. And that's the way you do it. You delegate the responsibility for decision-making down to the lowest competent level, and they're made, they're made competent by you training them and coaching them. And once you've trained them and coached them to a point where they can do the job, then just make sure that you don't use command and control, rather use command and feedback. So as you unleash their initiative, you're constantly hearing from them what's going on and you know when to adjust. But you want to get as much delegation of authority as you reasonably can, because that's the way organizations move more swiftly when opportunities present themselves and they don't get caught behind the competition.
Before I switch, General, to some specific battles, I want to do one more lesson from Call Sign Chaos applicable to every organization. Quote, high morale is reflected by the absence of self-pity, close quote. Why is that true, General Mattis?
Well, there's two points I'd make on this. First of all, if you ever see victimhood, where people say, well, I'm a victim, things happened, and that I don't have any options. the Vietnam generation taught me loud and clear you can always create options. But the other point is cynicism. When someone starts getting cynical and said, well, there's nothing I can do about it anyway, so why try? In the military, they taught me this is just a form of cowardice. In other words, I'm going to give up because nothing can be done about it. And the Marines taught me, and my study of philosophy reinforced that there's only one thing in this world that we really control, and that is what is your response to what happens around you. And you can always respond with something that will improve the situation. You can always come up with options unless you surrender to cynicism or victimhood. And I would just suggest, again, this is something that even in our country at large, we've got to get away from looking at exalting being a victim and exalt in those who actually change things for the better. And we've got a long history of these people, from our founding fathers to Abraham Lincoln to John F. Kennedy to Martin Luther King Jr. We have seen patriots step forward, and history is full of people like this who said, you know, we can do better. And that's usually done by people who don't accept the status quo, who don't accept that they're victims or that they should be cynical about the opportunities that are out there. There are opportunities, go find them.
You